Tamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Ruttama-shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 87, verse 30, the chapter entitled The Prayers of the Personified Vedas. Aparimita druvas tanuvruto yadi sarvagatas tarhina shashyate niyamo dhruvanetarata ajani chayanmayam tadavimuchya niyantar bhavet samam anujana janatam yat amatam dushtataya. Synonyms: aparimitaha, countless; dhruvaha, permanent; tanuvrataha, the embodied living entities; yadi, if; sarvagataha, omnipresent; tarhi, then; na, not; shashyata, sovereignty; iti, such; niyamaha, rule; dhruva, unchanging one; na, not; itaratha, otherwise; ajani, was generated; cha, and; yatmayam, from whose substance; tat, from that; avimuchya, not separating itself; niyantara, regulator; bhavet, must be; samam, equally present; anujanatam, of those who supposedly know; yat, which; amatam, misunderstood; mata, of what is known; dushtataya, because of the imperfection. Translation and purport by the disciples of Abhacharya Arvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: if the countless living entities were all-pervading and possessed forms that never changed, you could not possibly be their absolute ruler or immutable one. But since they are your localized expansions and their forms are subject to change, you do control them. Indeed, that which supplies the ingredients for the generation of something is necessarily its controller, because a product never exists apart from its ingredient cause. It's simply illusion for someone to think that he knows the Supreme Lord, who is equally present in each of his expansions, since whatever knowledge one gains by material means must be imperfect. Purport. Because the conditioned soul cannot directly understand the Supreme, the Vedas commonly refer to that Supreme Truth in such impersonal terms as Brahman and Om Tat Sat. If an ordinary scholar presumes to know the confidential meaning of these symbolic references, he should be rejected as an impostor. In the words of Sri Kena Upanishad 2.1, Yadi manyase suvedeti dhabram evapi nunam tvam veta brahmano rupam yadasya tvam yadasya deveshu. If you think you know Brahman well, then your knowledge is very meager. If you think you can identify Brahman's form from among the demigods, indeed you know but little. And again, yasya matam tasya matam matam yasya na vedasaha avigyatam vigyatam vigyatam avigyatam. Whoever denies having any opinion of his own about the supreme truth is correct in his opinion, whereas one who has his own opinion about the supreme does not know him. He is unknown to those who claim to know him, and can only be known by those who do not claim to know him. Kena Upanishad 2.3. Acharya Sridhar Swami gives the following explanation of this verse. Many philosophers have studied the mysteries of life from various perspectives and have formed widely different theories. The Advait Mayavadis, for example, propose that there is only one living being and one power of illusion, avidya, that covers him, producing the appearance of plurality. But this hypothesis leads to the absurd conclusion that when any one living being becomes liberated, everyone attains liberation. If, on the other hand, there are many avidyas to cover the one living being, each avidya will cover only some part of him, and we would have to talk about his becoming partly liberated at particular times, while his other parts remain in bondage. This is also obviously absurd. Thus, the plurality of living beings is an unavoidable conclusion. Furthermore, there are other theoreticians, namely the proponents of Nyaya and Vaisheshika, who claim that the Jiva soul is infinite in size. If souls are infinitesimal, these scholars argue they would not pervade their own bodies, whereas if they were of medium size, they would be divisible into parts and thus could not be eternal, at least according to the axioms of Nyaya Vaisheshika metaphysics. But if the numerous eternal Jiva souls are each infinitely large, how could they be covered by any power of bondage, whether belonging to Avidya or to the Supreme Lord Himself? According to this theory, there can be no illusion for the soul, no limitations from which to be liberated. The infinite souls must eternally remain as they are without change. This would mean that the souls would all be equal to God, since He would have no scope for controlling these all pervading, unchanging rivals. The Vedic Shruti mantras, which affirm unequivocally the mastery of the Lord over the individual souls, cannot be validly contradicted. A true philosopher must accept the statements of Shruti as reliable authority on all matters they touch. Certainly, in numerous places, the Vedic literatures contrast the Supreme Lord's perpetual, unchanging oneness with the ever changing embodiments of living beings caught up in the cycle of birth and death. Srila Sridhar Swami prays, Antaryanta sarvalokasya gita shrutya yuktya chaivam yeva vaseyaha ya sarvagyaha sarvashaktir narsimhaha Shrimantam tam chetasaivavalambhe. In my heart, I take shelter of him who is glorified as the inner controller of all the worlds and whom the Vedas ascertain in truth through logical reasoning. He is Narsimha, the omniscient and omnipotent Lord of the goddess of fortune. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamshyam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukum karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim Yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Vishwan. Hare Krishna, thank you everyone. Praying the blessings of all devotees, Adi Purush Prabhu, Virgin Prabhu, everyone, so that I can share something which is according to the scriptures under the guidance of the Acharyas and also inspiring and pleasing to Krishna. This verse, the translation, if the countless living entities were all pervading and possessed forms that never changed, you could not possibly be their absolute ruler or immutable one. But since they are your localized expansions and their forms are subject to change, you do control them. Indeed, that which supplies the ingredients for the generation of something is necessarily its controller, because a product never exists apart from its ingredient cause. It's simply illusion for someone to think that he knows the Supreme Lord, who is equally present in each of his expansions, since whatever knowledge one gains by material means must be imperfect. There's a book written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur called Dashamula Tattva. And in that particular book, basically he speaks about the 10 roots of Gaudiya Vaishnavism specifically. But in general, he also shares a lot with Madhvacharya, who's, of course, we are also part of the same tradition. He had written something very similar. So in those 10 uh, statements, Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually summarizes the profound philosophy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He kind of captures the essence of all of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings in those 10 points in a very succinct way. So, because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself in the guise of his own devotee, he explained how a spiritual seed planted in a person's heart by a qualified guru can grow into a vine of devotional service creeper that ultimately produces the most valuable fruit of love of Godhead, prema. And he called it as the Bhakti Lata Bija, the seed of the vine of devotion. So, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the gardener of that vine. So in this article, in this particular book that Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote about Dasamula Tattva, he also actually uses that particular plant analogy, and he gives Dashamula. Means Dashamula is considered as an Ayurvedic medicine. Usually there is a medicine called as Dashamula. So similarly, he offers this Dashamula Tattva, the 10 uh, truths, as a disease, as a what do you call, a medicine for curing the disease of material life. Because in Ayurvedic medicine, they call it as Dashamula, and it is used for certain purposes. So he used that same terminology and added the Dashamula Tattva as a way for curing the disease of material life of all conditioned living entities. And he also encapsulates in those 10 statements of Dashamula Tattva, he also combines the entire philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and also in the divisions of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. That means the knowledge that explains about our relationship between the Supreme Lord and the Jiva. And Abhideya is the knowledge that explains what are the various activities that one performs in that relationship to the Supreme. And Prayojana is the ultimate goal of life achieved by such activities that we do in Abhideya. So the first, why I'm explaining this thing, because this chapter is prayers of the personified Vedas, and the very first point in that 10 roots of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the first one is the Vedas constitute the principal scriptural evidence for ascertaining the truth, and in their essence, they expound the rest of the principles. All the other principles that he lists is all actually taken from the scriptures. So scriptures, the Vedas, the Shruti, is the principal scriptural evidence for ascertaining the truth, and especially the absolute truth. So the amount of emphasis that he places on the Vedic scriptures is enormous, because the first step itself is, if you don't accept that, then everything else stands invalid. So anyone who claims to have some knowledge about the absolute truth cannot contradict the Vedic scriptures. And here, that's why the Shrutis are praying about, in their prayers, they are including, indirectly condemning various attitudes towards the scriptures and using the scriptures to understand the absolute truth, which is not valid or which is not recommended by them. So, one of the attitude that is not useful in approaching the absolute truth is is arrogance or pride in one's knowledge, because the unknown especially inspires the humble and frustrates the proud ones. So a scholar, for them, anything which is unknown, anything which is difficult to ascertain, is a blow to their ego, if they are egoistic scholars, of course. However, someone who is humble, who surrendered, that very nature of the absolute truth becomes very inspiring. So, in order to love God, we may not fully, there is no need to fully know Him, but we all have the opportunity to love Him despite not understanding Him completely, because He is infinite. It would be impossible for finite conditioned souls to be able to understand the infinite fully. So that is why, yeah, we may not be able to fully know Him, but we all can fully love Him. That is possible. And that's why here the Vedas are saying, the Shrutis are praying to the Supreme Lord, that some may think, oh, that is when some may put forward this particular philosophy saying, oh no, the living entity is also infinite. So it is actually God. So just when it comes out of that illusion that it is not God, then naturally it'll know everything and it'll become God. So in that sense, the Supreme is knowable or knowable for the individual. So that is what is exactly being contradicted by the Vedic scripture, saying, how can the soul be the Supreme? And Srimad Bhagavatam is also considered as the commentary on the Brahma Sutras, Vedanta Sutras. And Vedanta Sutra does uh, establish the nature of the absolute truth and proves the conceptions of Vaisheshika and Nyaya as limited. So here again in this purport, we saw how the worldview of Nyaya and Vaisheshika philosophies, they may say, oh, if the jiva is infinitesimal, how could it pervade its own body? And if it was in medium size, it could become divisible. So that is why, in order to accommodate those contradictions, they say the soul is infinite. But it gives rise to another contradiction. If the soul is infinite, then how is it under the control of the Supreme, who is also infinite? How can there be multiple infinites? So that is why Kena Upanishad is clearly saying, whoever claims to know the Supreme does not know Him. But when we say we are also sitting and discussing something about the Supreme, however, we are doing it under the shelter of the scriptures, not just the scriptures, under the shelter of realized teachers. So scriptures are not like, of course, today there is printing media and we all have access to a lot of literatures, and we continue to study, but we also study with commentary, with guidance from the teachers. So that is on a different level. But to just pick up the Sanskrit and read on one's own or translate on one's own without any guidance, there is a lot of chance that one can actually commit mistakes and end up with something which is skewed according to their own influence of the three modes. So that is why it is clearly mentioned that the Vedic knowledge or the knowledge about the absolute truth is learned, is not like kind of grasped or like grabbed. So quoting verses can be like or people may know verses and we may be able to quote them. But a lot of time people use shastra, that is the scriptural knowledge, to debate. But the purpose of the shastric knowledge is not to debate, it is to elevate one's consciousness. And so quoting verses, quoting philosophy is not necessarily to prove one's point, but to improve one's condition of the heart. So the devotional reading, studying is not just for proving points or to debate or to cram some information. It is primarily for effecting change of heart and to also elevate one's consciousness. A lot of time, it is very hard when we hear a repeated theme or a speaker who is not grabbing our attention. So then it becomes very hard to focus. We think, oh, I've already heard this, and we may tune out. However, to actually stay close to that mood of being a servant while studying, hearing, speaking the Shastra, not a judge or not a, what do you call, not a someone who is a screening or like a scholar, like an intellectual, that alone does not completely reveal the meaning of the scriptures. That is why Krishna says humility as the first ingredient, because with humility, the heart can be opened up. So we are just thinking of opening up the brain. We consider that as the center of intelligence in the modern world. We think of opening up the brain and putting in some information. But what the scriptures are teaching is open up your heart and awaken some love in there. So despite knowing all the information, all the shastras, when we look at the acharyas like Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Narottam Das Thakur, they pray like a child. I don't have any shelter. I'm struggling in this ocean of material existence. I'm drowning in the ocean of material existence. They pray in a very helpless mood. They don't pray like a scholar who's analyzing the attributes of the Supreme or debating and judging. They don't approach scriptures. They don't approach the Supreme Lord like an academic professor. They approach the scriptures like a beggar, and they pray like a child. Though they preach like a scholar for sure, when it comes to expounding the philosophy and explaining it and teaching it to others, they do uh, speak like a scholar, but they pray like a child. Because even if someone is a great devotee, still the Supreme Lord is unlimited, even for them. So the unknown humbles those great devotees, does not frustrate them, because they take shelter of the love of God, not just the logic. So it is very important to stay close to the mood of being a servant while approaching the spiritual knowledge. And in that way, the highest knowledge about the absolute truth to some extent can be revealed in our hearts. What it's we may understand it intellectually, but in order for it to really touch our heart and transform and uplift and elevate our consciousness, and to be able to personally then realize Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam Pavitram Idamuttamam Pratyaksha Dharmim Susukam Kartumavayam. In order to be able to personally realize that spiritual knowledge, the condition of the heart is very important. And that's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his 10 roots of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the first thing he mentions is these scriptures. Without accepting the scriptures, it would be impossible to accept rest of the 9 points that he makes. And the attitude to accept the scriptural knowledge is being explained by the Shrutis in this particular verse, which is actually humility. And also the misconceptions that one comes up with one's own logic in order to defend one's ego is a real problem in scriptural understanding. When we don't understand something, or when we try to understand something independent of the acharyas, then all we are left with is justifications and interpretations that are almost like an excuse of the intelligence in order to support our ego. And we may end up in a lot of debating. And we see even for valid topics within authorized circles, there are a lot of debates, which is important to ascertain truth. However, I remember recently I was reading Srila Prabhupada's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13. Let me see if I can pull it out. And it was very beautiful how he wrote something. This is chapter 13. I'll end with this point. This is chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, verse 20, purport by Srila Prabhupada. He says, this verse is about the nature of the living entities. So the verse says, material nature, that is Prakriti, and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. And in that connection of considering the living entities are beginningless. So Prabhupada writes, with the four coming forth of material nature, these living entities are again given a chance to act in the material world. He says how the living entities always exist. They're part of the Supreme Lord. When they become averse to serving the Supreme Lord, they enter into the material sky and they go on. And in that material world, they prepare themselves to enter into the spiritual world. So that is the mystery of this material creation. He says, why? What is the purpose of material creation? We were in spiritual world, and because we became averse to this serving the Supreme Lord, so we were not allowed to enter into the spiritual sky. Rather, we came under the influence of material nature. And here we prepare ourselves to enter back into the spiritual world. And then he says, this is the mystery of material creation. After that, he answers, actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. But due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned within material nature. So naturally, the question may come, oh, how did we become rebellious in the spiritual world? It's impossible. How did it happen? So Prabhupada, assuming that question would naturally come, he writes, it does not really matter. I'm reading again. It really does not matter how these living entities or superior entities of the Supreme Lord have come in contact with material nature. He's just saying it does not matter. I'm not against the, what do you call, uh, intellectually and devotionally authentic discussions on such topics. But here I'm just repeating what Prabhupada is giving, the attitude of a Acharya, that the Supreme Personality of Godhead knows. However, how and why this actually took place. That's all. His judgment about this whole issue is the Supreme Lord. I have faith in Krishna, and he knows how and why this actually took place. And it does not really matter. I'm here and I need to get back to the spiritual world, and the path is bhakti. And how to execute bhakti has been very clearly explained by the acharyas. And even in those differences, if something is given, if something is inherited, something is inherent, Prabhupada's mood seems to be you practice bhakti and it will naturally revealed in your heart. And to that extent, he writes also, recently we were reading the preface to Nectar of Instruction. And there was a very nice statement. He speaks about, he says, everyone within this material world is engrossed in the modes of passion and ignorance. One must promote himself to the platform of goodness, sattva guna, by following the instructions of Rupa Goswami, and then everything concerning how to make further progress will be revealed. So he's from a school which believes that higher truths will be revealed as we become qualified. there are some what do you call, knowledge and instructions given by the guru, and the more sincerely one practices that, the further information needed to progress uh, on the path will be revealed in the heart. So that is Prabhupada's take, and it's past 45, so I'll pause here and see if there are any thoughts, questions, reflections. Min Hare Krishna.
Hey, Krishna. Thank
Hare
you very
Krishna.
much for the class.
Hare
I
Krishna.
wanted to ask a question. I was reading uh, Srimad Bhagavatam this morning, and the verses I was reading connects very nicely to what we read this morning. And the place I was at is the chapter where Maharaj Pruta milks the Mother Earth. And at the beginning of that chapter, the verses and Prabhupada speaks quite a bit about Shruti and Smriti, the importance of them. And it is recommend well, it's we're told to that if we don't follow them, then our lives will just not be successful. It will be unsuccessful again and again. And as I was reading that, I had a sense of claustrophobia. Like it's like follow them tightly. And it kind of caught me by surprise, the way I felt. And it made me think of something like, in the Western world, society especially, like when I was young, my parents would tell me, you should not do that, you should do this, you don't want to experience bad things. Like if you listen, you won't experience, your life will be peaceful. But but I felt like I was like, no, I'm gonna go experience it on my own. I'll do it on my own, and I'll find out for myself this very intense, utter independence that of, in order to coming to one's own by one's feet, it's that sense is very strong. So I felt like maybe that attitude was coming up, like when I heard this verse where I was like, I have to follow everything. And and you also explained nicely about what kind of attitude we could have um, toward that. But I'd like to ask if there's specific way of being practicing humility at those times to hear um, the
Um,
the scriptures.
so if I get, thank you, man. Uh, if I get your question rightly, you're asking, or how do we practice humility when something we are unable to understand and we have to be completely dependent on accepting just whatever is
Yeah,
given or spoken in that particular aspect of
yeah, and have some
truth.
sort of resistance.
Mm, some resistance. Thank you. So for sure, I have personal experience of feeling that resistance. It's natural. I think it's the gift of academic education that we develop that kind of an attitude. It's also very glorified in general as being thoughtful. However, it can be a roadblock in understanding sometimes spiritual truth. However, I would say personally for me, Prabhupada did a good job of hammering from the beginning that how insignificant the soul is, how insignificant I am, and how much covered by ignorance and all that. So remembering those things, that how the influence of the three modes is so strong, and I'm under the intense grips of those. Reminding myself of those things, usually I can feel, oh, okay, I'm nobody. Like in a real sense, I don't know the absolute truth, but I have this faith that Prabhupada knows. So in those subject matters which is beyond my grasp of what even Prabhupada is saying,
Mm.
like forget about my own opinion. Even when Prabhupada is putting forth an opinion, if I'm just struggling to accept it, I may park it on the side and feel, probably if my foundation became stronger, and if I practiced the values that are required, in order to understand this thing that Prabhupada is explaining. Probably it will be revealed over a period of time. So I will look back and see what is it that on a foundation level that I'm already lacking, which would be a prerequisite to understand this knowledge.
Mm.
In not just in terms of knowledge, but in terms of attitude and growth and the what do you call the budding of consciousness. How what is lacking on my part that my current level of consciousness is unable to grasp this or experience this, even if it is not able to understand it. So that would be one thing. But there are many things that I can personally comfortably park on the side and not worry about. To be honest, the concept of the fall of Jiva, I never completely could wrap my brain around that topic. And there are few topics like that. And it's not that I'm averse to understanding them. I feel I have some understanding what Prabhupada has given, and he did not seem to emphasize a lot on that. Different places he has told different things. So my attitude is there is much more important and basic that Prabhupada wants to, first of all, develop in me, and then also to have the faith that once I come to a certain stage, naturally those things which are required to be revealed further will also come. So for now, why not uh, spiritual reality be both sides? Why is it only this way or that way? Sometimes Krishna is so inconceivable, everything could be possible. So I just don't know, honestly. So then instead of taking sides, I would, and here and there I find Prabhupada statements which are very neutral on such topics, very dismissive of such topics sometimes. So I would think, okay, uh, let me keep it and acknowledge that I don't know. If someone asks me too much about that, I'll very honestly say I have very limited knowledge about that. And these are the things where Prabhupada says. So I think you can find someone who can explain you better. For my own personal thing, I'm not disturbed. I'm not like insecure that I don't know those things.
Mm.
Because my own experience with whatever little I have with the mantra and with the practice gives me enough faith that this process will further reveal me whatever I need to know. If it has opened my consciousness this much and it is potent to open the consciousness further, and when it is required, I'll be able to gain that understanding. These are some of my thoughts.
Great. Thank you so much.
Anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think that was actually really helpful. I think I was in many ways looking for just sort of immediate practical response I could kind of bring to that attitude. And what you just shared was actually very helpful in a way that it wasn't really a black and white answer that I thought I needed, but it was more nuanced. And so in that way, that's really helpful for me. Yeah, thank you.
Krishna, thank you, man. Adipurushra, would you like to share something?
Okay, we're trying to show Prabhupada what to say. Can you hear us okay?
Yes,
Yes. Yeah, very, very clear, succinct, and complete class. Thank you so much. Very, we can reflect a few things that you said so perfectly. The complexities that Krishna allows people to take up these different ways of looking at things, the different philosophies, the complexities are like mind-boggling, and Prabhupada says, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting, right? Where do these other paths and philosophies and speculative attitudes lead? If they don't lead to love of God, if they don't lead to devotional service, it's just mental gymnastics, right? It's amazing how they concoct so many things just to avoid and distract us from the conclusion of, Lord, how can I serve you? I want to please you. And spiritual life is so simple. It's premapum arta mahan, love of God, love of God. Religion means to love God. Even Prabhupada says, whether whatever tradition you're taking up, if it ends at devotion, trust and love and service to God, obedience to God, it's okay. That's the bottom line. And if it doesn't, what's the use, right? What does it say in the Bhagavatam? Without devotional service, what's the use of severe austerities, control of the mind, control of the senses, the power of speech? Without devotional service, a bunch of zero. So that's where we can have the litmus test. If that's where it goes, cool. And it's really not that difficult. You mentioned about the childlike attitude of my spiritual master knows what he's doing. Let me do it the way he wants it. And why not? Everything else will be revealed. Anyway, just maybe what I'm saying is too lengthy. We're just going to one thing: surrender to Krishna, love Krishna, serve Krishna, please the Lord. All glory to Srila Prabhupada Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Gaura Sharan Prabhu, Adipusha Prabhu. So we just have to keep on serving, and then the origins of Jiva will be revealed. Is that what you're saying?
The origins of the diva, yeah, that's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur also says. He says, as long as you are within the influence of the three modes and the conception of time as it operates in the material world, he says, even if I explain, you won't be able to understand. It does not mean like there's others don't need to like defend their our sampradaya or the teachers or our understanding. There will always be need for scholarly devotees in order to defend the proper conclusions of the scriptures. So that is not a problem, or that is not, it is that it is not required. It is also required. But for me personally, I'm stupid, so I would be satisfied accepting some of those all of the things that but the acharyas are saying. And when I don't understand some things, then I can go to others whom I have trust and faith, and who embody those values of trust in my acharyas. I would go to them and clarify. And still, if I'm not able to understand, I'm okay. Without understanding, the Hare Krishna mantra has already taken effect to some extent, and I'm pretty sure it can do the further job if my attitude is better. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, the most important thing is Trinadapi Sunichena Taroriva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadaharihi. So there is some value to that. So there is value to scriptural scholarship for sure.
Thank you, Gaura Sharan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu's.
Okay, Jivas, please. One more minute of yagya, please. Keep it going. Remember speaking with Dharmaraj on this subject, and he said, if you're asking this question, where did I come from? How did I end up here if I'm spirit soul? When did this whole thing start? He said, then the question itself is within the framework of time, and Krishna is outside time. So if you put in Krishna within the frame, you can't put Krishna within the framework of time. The question is irrelevant because it's relevant, relative, yeah. Within the concept of time, Krishna, then God would be, then time would be God, not Krishna. Krishna would be subject to time, which he is not. So therefore, let's keep on taking prasadam here in the Bhagavatam, glorifying Krishna together, serving, cooperating, putting on tilak like Gaura Sharan Prabhu does every day. And everything will be revealed and experienced and sublime. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gaura Sharan Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande.
Temple room. Back to you. Darshan time. Jai Nitai Prabhu ki jai. Jai Nitai Prabhu facilitates the best darshans. He zooms in.
We're still waiting.
Chaitanya Prabhu is increasing our separation.
I wish I could take credit for that, Prabhu.
You had different devotees blowing conscious to be able to turn. At least I could tell who was doing it. Everyone me.
Shri Shri Radha Murlidhar Ki Jai. Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Amaham Bhajami Venam Kvantam Maya Vindadalaya Kashnam Bhagavatam Namastitam Buddham Buddham Andalagato Nikamaniya Vitesa Om Adi Purusham Amaham Bhajami Hari Purusham Hari Purusham Amaham Bhajami Hari Purusham Amaham Bhajami Anganiyasya Satam Diyavitimati Anjantipam Ikayati Hiramam Jagauki Anajadachimaya Sadhu Bhagavindraya Govindam Manipurasham Amaham Bhajami Govindam Manipurasham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Manipurasham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Hari Purusham Bhajami Govindam Hari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Hari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Hari Purusham Jai Shri Shri Radha Murlidhar Gaura Chandra Bhagavan Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai All the assembled Vaishnavas Ki Jai. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can obtain pure devotion and service. Bow down to the Lord of feet, pray all and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material things and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words of the opening from the devoted mouth. Attachment to the devoted feet is the perfection and fulfillment of all desire. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, and by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master, the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of the devotees. Oh, Master, be merciful to us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. May your fame be spread all over the three worlds. We take shelter at your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Janitai Prabhu. Jai Baba Bhakti Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Afterglow. Nice seeing you all. Dear devotees, if you'd like to share something, please go ahead. If not, you can just say how wonderful is Krishna, how inconceivable is Krishna, and keep on serving Krishna and the devotees. Okay, let's see. We have Vasudev Prabhu with us. Vasudev Prabhu, would you like to speak? Would you like to say something in regards to the fall of Jiva? Paradox, maybe? It's okay if not. We understand how busy you are pushing on Lord Chaitanya's movement. Vasudev Prabhu. We're always grateful for your association.
Hare Krishna. I don't have much to add. It was a nice class and well-balanced presentation. Personal, very personal also. So yeah, I very much agree with his point of view that a lot of things are very controversial, or you can endlessly argue either ways. But sometimes it's better to say like, I don't know. Someone says this, someone says that. It's beyond me. I just chant Hare Krishna, and that's fine.
Thank you,
Also,
Vasudev Prabhu.
at the same time, these verses and these commentaries are very, these are very scholarly. And sometimes there's also a bit of a tendency amongst devotees to dismiss, like, oh, this is just philosophy. This is like dry. It's all about devotional service. We just have to chant Hare Krishna, and we can kind of dismiss these presentations. But our acharyas, they wrote in highly philosophical ways. Like if you read Jiva Goswami, even his Sanskrit is like very elevated, very difficult to read actually. Even for his time, it's like even his Sanskrit is highly intellectual. Or you read about Bhaktisiddhanta, his writings, it's very, even Prabhupada, sometimes I just couldn't understand. So sometimes we're a little bit dismissive of that kind of, if we come across that, like, oh, this is just intellectual, this is all. But no, this is, our acharyas are great scholars and intellectuals, and they write for intellectuals. And there's a value to that, for us to study that as best as we can with our limitations, and for others who have that scholarly inclination to study that, they didn't write it for no reason. So it's also important to keep that in mind, to not dismiss it like, oh, it's, we chant Hare Krishna, that's all, intellectual stuff. No, it's not like that. We should really value it. We may not be able to access it, that's fine, because it's our disqualification, but we should honor it and respect it.
Thank you, Vasudev Prabhu. Very important point. Thank you. Mathuranath Prabhu is raising his hand.
Hare Krishna. Really beautiful class. I had a question. How do we come to the platform? I guess the humility. How do we come? We talked a little bit about humility. I really appreciated the point where having the humility to really embrace how great Krishna is and relish it. relish how amazing Krishna is instead of wanting to challenge that, wanting that, or that's like an insult. So my question for the Vaishnavas is how do we come to that platform of humility, not only to embrace Krishna's greatness, but embrace what Krishna wants me to do in, in my life, in mission to him, in daily surrender, full life surrender. How can we really come to embrace that? I think a lot of us are struggling with that, where it's, oh, but I still have these desires, I still have these attachments. So if anybody has some realization of things that can support us, to just come to the platform that Krishna, I'm yours. I'm yours, and do with me whatever you like.
Great question, Maturnath Prabhu. You must have been a sage in Naimisharanya forest at one point. Okay, who is willing to?
One of the monkeys, maybe one of the monkeys.
Yeah. Adipusha Prabhu, would you like to address this very
Well,
wonderful question?
we can only say what Scripture says. We become like who we associate with. Who are we looking up to? Who do we allow to speak in our life? Who do we want to follow? Who do we serve? We serve somebody who's third class, we become fourth class. If we hear from somebody who's watered down the philosophy, we get a misconception. So we have like a menu before us, such a spectrum of interesting and varieties of devotees. And when we have a desire, Krishna, I want to please you. Sometimes, we had a lot of Sankirtan devotees traveling, and sometimes somebody would say he'd fall out of the fire. He'd become a little bit less than fully throwing themselves into it. And then they would, well, go with Chetiraj, go with Nityo. They would travel with a devotee who was in the fire. You put the iron in the fire, it becomes hot. Anyway, that's what I've heard. A very good question he's asking. How can I be like that? Put yourself with somebody who's like that, and then you'll be uplifted by that quality of association. If you throw yourself in a fast-moving river, then you get swept away by the current in the direction and at the speed that river is going. Well, glory to Prabhupada.
Thank you, Adipusha Prabhu. That's a great strategy. Bona fide strategy. Thank you. We can only see the top of Maturnath Prabhu's head, but we see that he's very satisfied. Yes. Would anyone else like to speak to that? I'm still trying to challenge Krishna. I can't really answer how to stop. I'm struggling with it myself. Okay. Where is Karen? Karen, Isaiah, and Annabelle, please. It's your turn to glorify Krishna. As loud as you can, though.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Hi.
Bye.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Nice seeing you all, dear devotees. Have a wonderful day.
I go on
Serve
the
Krishna.
camp. Bye.
Yeah. Bye. You're in the camp. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Puppetry camp.
Wonderful. Bhakti camp. Cool. Have fun, Isaiah. Have fun for Krishna.
Bye.